going to go, yeah.
I was going to introduce myself and say something about the group program at the University of Rochester. We have I've been doing groups with the psychiatry residents for about 5 or 6 years. And we do this on a kind of ad hoc basis outside of the residency curriculum. The residency leadership is very supportive of this, but have not been able to figure out a way to kind of cram this into the curriculum itself. So I offer something sort of on the side for those that really want this. And so I'd say a small fraction of the residents participate. I offer it in a course format, 1 semester course, 15 groups, 15 weeks. We meet weekly for 90 minutes for 1 semester. If residents want to re-up for the second or the subsequent semester, they can do that. And I've certainly had a number of residents that have gone, for several years, fall semester, spring semester, fall semester, spring semester, sometimes summers when I get a call from the group to say, can we just not stop for the summer and keep going? And then, okay, I want to be responsive to enthusiasm. My groups run on a kind of a process model. I call them process groups, a training group, and the sort of the theoretical perspective that I am informed by is modern analysis, where we're looking to put thoughts and feelings into words as they occur in the moment within oneself and towards other members of the group, and talk about the emotionally significant stories of our lives, with the idea that we're going to learn more about how to pay attention to our emotional experience and move towards that and get more attuned to ways in which we sort of block that emotional experience within us, and to see what happens when we do that. So that's, I think a capsule summary of what we're doing in Rochester.
We do it quite differently at UT Southwestern in Dallas. One thing you didn't tell us, Bill, is that they actually pay you, whereas they don't pay the T group leaders at UT Southwestern. We need to have a consult. Maybe you can help us.
That is true, right?
The powers that be into that. But we require the residents to be involved, and there's usually about 50 residents, 55 residents at UT Southwestern in all 4 years. So for all 4 years, they actually are required to be in a T group, but it only meets twice a month typically, and only for an hour, and it's part of the didactic program. So they kind of work it into didactics. But we also meet 4 times a year with all 4 residency classes together. So we have about 50 people in the large group, and they meet for 2 hours 4 times a year. Our residents also are required to run a group for 1 year, and they're required to be in supervision during that year that they're running a group. Usually they're doing that during their PGY3 year. So that's how we do it there.
Okay, I'm Martha Gilmore in Sacramento, California, working with UC Davis. And I've been actually doing the resident group for just about 30 years with various co-leaders and various numbers of groups. Currently, we have 3 groups running with 3 sets of co-leaders. So I have a co-leader. We're a little different, I think, than the other groups in that we combine all years of residency. It's a voluntary program. And I think at this point, we usually have about half of the residents attending a group. We meet for about 9 months, 9 to 10 months a year, weekly for 90 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, we move out of a process group, which is not dissimilar to what Bill described, but more from a relational psychoanalytic perspective. The last 10 minutes, we call it a reverse fishbowl, where the 2 leaders move into the middle and talk about the group theoretically for 5 minutes. And then the whole group talks about the group theoretically for 5 minutes. So I think that's what I can say about the group right now. So let's open it up to discussion. Again, we're really interested in learning from you. I know we have people that are currently in group and people that were in group years ago here. And so we want to hear about what it was like for you and what it's like as you think back over the years, how it's affected you, what worked well, what were the drawbacks. Dale had sent some questions. We might ask some of those more specific questions as we go along, but just how about if everybody opens their mics and we have a process groupy kind of discussion about group.
I can jump in. I had just an experience while you were describing our group, Martha. Sorry, my name is Nathan. I'm still in Sacramento, and I was a member of Martha's group for 4 years. Just reflecting a little bit on some of the things I got out of the group. While you were talking, Martha, I realized that I had completely forgotten about the fishbowl component of the group. And I tend to think that of the many valuable things that I got from the experiencing group, most of it was experiential. And that maybe accounts for why the fishbowl slipped my mind. Maybe sometimes I was sort of too charged or too activated from the 90 minutes beforehand to really make that separation into shifting my attention to a more analytic kind of meta level for the group.
Yeah, I can add to that feeling. It was really valuable, the fishbowl part. But I remember groups being so intense, it was hard to turn that off and then to listen to two group leaders talk about me or talk about whatever was going on in the group as if we weren't there. That was, but it was a good experience. It's always neat to hear what your group leaders might have thought about what was going on. And I'll just keep going a little. The hardest part about being in a group was, I guess it was 90 minutes. I didn't know that. I thought it was an hour, but our groups were so intense, and maybe they still are. And then we had to leave and go to work with all these people. And we were like, I don't know, maybe we didn't know what we were doing or we weren't very nice or something, but sometimes we really got into it with people and then kind of had to figure out how to go to work with them and walk back to wherever we were going and run into people later on. But the really valuable part about doing that was it's like real life as a doctor. Like I only do inpatient psychiatry. I have for years. So everything's team work, everything's working with other people in pretty intense situations. And so it's kind of this, it was I don't know what you call it, a proving ground or something, just giving me this experience of being in intense situations and then working stuff out later. Super valuable. It was one of the best parts of residency. And we had a real intense thing happen about 2 years in. I can't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years in. It became so popular that we had to split into two groups. And, you know, we had 4 group leaders instead of 2 group leaders. And so this cozy group that we'd been with for like 2 years, or at least 1 year, some of those people went into a second group with new people that came in, and some new people came into our group, and everybody was really pissed off, and it was a super disruptive experience. But even that was like a good, you know, a growth thing. But it was, yeah, it was like wild west sometimes. And I'm surprised you're in 3 groups now, Martha. Maybe it's even more popular, or the residency's gotten bigger. When I was there was probably 33 residents, 34 residents. And a lot of people were in, I forget, 12 people maybe in each group, but it was good.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm in Sacramento still from UC Davis, and right now I'm working most of my time in private practice, and I'm a psychoanalytic candidate, and then part of my time at a partial hospitalization program. And I'm definitely have been reflecting back on my training and what's been most useful to me, at least in the kind of work that I'm trying to do now. And how much there is to sit with trying to do therapy in the unconscious realm, even in an individual session. And I felt like looking back on my training, process group was the most helpful for that from an experiential perspective. Both to have that experience and not know, but also to know, to get a sense of all of the stuff that you yourself are bringing to the room and not even aware of, or how quickly you can get caught up in something. And I'm thinking about the intensity that we've been talking about, and then trying to go back to real life. I mean, we have to do that when we do therapy, sort of contain it in some way. And, you know, in reality, we're all kind of doing this all the time and things are chaotic. We're just not necessarily aware that we're doing it in the same way. So that to me was the most helpful part about process group, but also probably the part that I least enjoyed at the time, how intense it was.
No, thanks, Nicole. That's great.
I really loved my experience at UT Southwestern. So I graduated in 2019, and now I'm running my first resident T group. Just kind of weird. But it was like, I'm in private practice, I'm doing group therapy. It was so formative for me. And I think something that made UT Southwestern tricky, like I'm hearing about the intensity for all of you, and we definitely had those intense experiences, but because it was not voluntary, it felt like there was always this split in what people wanted to get out of T group. You know, someone like me, I really wanted that intensity and personal growth. And I got that ultimately, right? But not without kind of butting heads or bumping up against people who just wanted it to be, you know, this is where we kind of vent or have a supportive experience, or, you know, let things be a little looser, you know?
I was thinking along the same lines. So I'm Eleanor. I'm one of the first year residents at UT Southwestern. And I think one of the biggest challenges for our group has been that there are members who, you know, are quite resistant to the idea of doing group, kind of for the same reasons somebody mentioned about, you know, when things come up, then like interpersonal conflict in the group, and, you know, you still have to work with those people. And, you know, group would be a good place to talk that stuff through, but, you know, certain members of my class are just pretty resistant to doing it. And so I think it really changes the dynamic, because in some ways you don't get quite so far because people are, you know, dragging their feet. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that too. I'm Darlene. I'm from UT Southwestern, and I think the first 2 years, at least for my class, it was a lot of like just kind of venting about residency in general, and not really talking about kind of our own group dynamics within the group. But then once we started actually leading our own groups and learning about how to do that, it's kind of made our T group a bit more meaningful, and how we're able to like point out like, oh, I noticed that a certain person might have been dominating the T group, and like, or like wondering like what made somebody ask a certain question about that. And it's kind of like made our T groups, to me, a little more meaningful. And we've started to actually like, I feel like, look at kind of our dynamics and maybe get feedback from like how we interact with others. And for me, like, I think that that's valuable professionally.
That's
Hi,
great,
I'm
Darlene.
Aspen. I'm from the University of Rochester. what a couple of you have mentioned made me think of what I really valued about our group, which was that it was voluntary. I think that was really helpful, especially at the very start of it. And I think we had a couple of semesters where the same group continued on together. And so I think having a longitudinal group of the same people, I think that was helpful. As there was turnover, you know, obviously it changes the dynamic of the group. And so I think that very beginning part where we had the same group members, you know, all there voluntarily. The other thing, I think, Eric, you mentioned it before, was after the groups were over, because of the intensity, I found myself working through. And so I appreciated that ours were at the end of the day because I could go home and do that. I think I probably would have been really distracted at work if I was doing that while I was trying to care for patients. I probably would have been tempted to ignore my clinical stuff as much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then I think something a little bit more concrete that I really appreciated from the groups was kind of like learning about one, just kind of how Bill ran the group, learning some of the vocabulary and how to work into things, how to work through things. That was kind of some concrete value for me. And then also like learning about kind of the dominant themes and then the less dominant narratives. I think that was something that I took from the group, is like how to find those and navigate and identify.
Yeah, thanks, Aspen.
Talia here. I'm also from the University of Rochester. And I think I just want to echo some of the points that Aspen brought up. I think we had our process group was unique in that it was voluntary. So for me personally, I think I was part of it from the very beginning. It was something kind of nice about going through that journey with other people who had signed up to go on that journey together. And I think that having it be voluntary didn't, take away from any of the dynamic issues or situations that came up, because we did have a lot of that. And especially when we had the new members that would be folded in, that was a really unique, it was a unique experience to kind of learn how to incorporate other interactions into this kind of sacred bubble that we had created over the weeks and months. So I'm attending in CL right now, and I find that I'm using a lot of the kind of foundational things when I'm interacting with my residents, just about the language specifically, like asking, I kind of hear Dr. Watson's voice in my head saying, well, put that into words. How does, what does that feel like? And I think for that alone, it was pretty invaluable.
Thanks, Natalia.
When you guys say voluntary, I mean, at UC Davis, it was voluntary as well, but it seemed like there was a commitment to like being there the entire year. I'm not sure if that's the case because it was a long time ago for me, but is that right, Martha?
Yes, that's
yeah,
right.
So it wasn't like we had people coming in and out. And in fact, if somebody didn't show up, it was kind of a big deal. If they were late or they didn't show up or they treated it kind of casually and walked in late, or those became big issues too. I don't know, that seemed to be a really good framework for it. I know we had an introductory group where people could check it out, but then after that it was like closed, I think.
Yeah.
Yours, it sounds like, Eric, yours was voluntary but part of the curriculum.
Yes, we had protected time.
Yeah.
And that was really cool because like I'm in an internship and I might be on a medicine rotation or neurology or something, and we were allowed to go to the group.
Yeah.
You know.
It's different than that in Rochester, which is why we were doing that but the commitment was just for one semester for 15 weeks. And then if you wanted to recommit for the next semester, you could do that. But when we, sometimes, as Natalia was saying, sometimes it'd be the same group, but plenty of times there'd be some shifting in membership from semester to semester.
Just to draw that out a little bit, I'd forgotten about that part of it at UCD, and some of my early learning was around asserting, becoming assertive and effective in maintaining the commitment to the group when I was challenged by the pressure from the medicine team or from the neurology team. That was a learning area for me, and in part because if I was late to group, we processed in the group what my lateness meant, and et cetera, and so that forced me to engage in some conflict I wasn't comfortable with. That pushed me, and then ironically, I could kind of use those new growing skills with the medicine team and engage in conflict with them so that I could avoid it in the group.
Yes, and I can tell you that was often a theme, and unfortunately things have slipped some because the requirements to be actually in medicine and other things have changed for the residents. So they have, especially the interns, miss about 3 months of the group, which makes it more challenging. I also want to mention that in our program, people can choose to return each year, so they can be in the group for 4 years, and some subset of the group continues with each other, and new members come and some people leave. So there's sort of that continuity as well.
If I could, I wanted to ask a question of Darlene, or a question that follows up on something Darlene was saying, that if I heard you right, the first 2 years, the experience was more of kind of a forum to gripe and complain about issues in the residency, whereas later it turned more inward to the process that was happening. And actually, the question is to the leaders, because my experience was that, or maybe I learned this from the group members and not so much from the leaders, but the experience was that using a process group as a forum to gripe about the residency was discouraged. And I have the sense that was done actively, but I'd like to maybe put that to Margaret and see if that's, or to Martha and see if that's the case.
It was certainly the case for us. Like Dale and unlike Bill, the leaders have never been compensated. So it's a volunteer clinical faculty position to lead. And because we take up work time and always resist the invitation from the department to have the group in the evening, we've been very strong about resisting that. There's always been mixed support from various attendings about attending the group. And so one of the issues is we try to be fairly cautious about not providing a place where the residents can foment rebellion and revolution out in their departments, feeling that would make it much less likely that group could continue. And the other is more of a theoretical one, that whatever, which is probably the stronger reason, that whatever is happening in the group reflects what's going on in the group, so that the conversations about the outside world are sort of a deflection from what's actually happening in the room. And that's really a theoretical focus in group therapy generally.
I can speak about that a bit. As a prior member, my name is Julia. I was in the UC Davis group led by Martha Gilmore. And as a resident who, well, many of us have our version of this, but I had some pretty awful times individually from certain parts of the administration, which have since changed. And so as somebody who specifically experienced that, I can attest to the fact that there was, yes, there was some benefit. There were sort of that even though it's a process group, it's not a therapy group, there were still therapeutic effects of the group. And maybe, you know, a 10% sliver of that is sort of the venting and support and the camaraderie and that, but it was not the focus. I did find it very helpful to have a safe space for that purpose, but it was not the primary purpose. It was very, I feel like Martha and her co-leader would, especially Martha, would keep us very much on track. You know, after a while of this going on, it's like, I'm hearing these things in the room, or, you know, how interesting, the bad guys are out there. Where's the bad guy in here? And you would say it more eloquently, of course, but it was very clear that the major focus was about learning the roles that people take on and the dynamics that happen in the group using the experience, the direct experience in the room. And that's what made it so valuable. And I would say for that reason, one of top 2 or 3 most valuable parts of my education.
I wonder if some of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Eleanor.
Oh, I was just going to say to echo that, I found the venting to actually be kind of like a helpful, I don't know exactly how to put this in the most elegant terms, but like, I think we were just all coming into group so overwhelmed, because for us, it was like halfway through our day, and we were kind of rushed to get out of our clinical sites. And so it was just like, I remember starting group feeling very frazzled with the demands of the day. And so to be able to do that venting for like 10 or 15 minutes at the start seemed really helpful to like get it out. And then like you can kind of progress with the other dynamics. And I felt like when it was kind of too quickly discouraged in our group, it ended up with the group getting frustrated at the facilitator or at the group leader, because it was kind of like, it felt like we were being too directed, like we weren't being allowed to really have any agency in what like the should that we should be talking about was.
What a rich dynamic. That's what comes to mind hearing this from you, Eleanor. Just, oh my God, there's so much there.
I think the mix of the venting and then understanding what's going on in the room was really well managed by Dr. Watson. I'm Andrew Martina. I graduated from Rochester. I'm now a CL fellow. And I think the management of how that goes was really important. I know it kept me engaged, I think, just enough. I'm confident with that. But, you know, I think it's important, at least for our group, to realize that, like, we didn't come to residency to learn how to run a T group. We came to be psychiatrists, and part of that involves a lot of different things. And when our time is so limited, and when all of us aren't together, especially through the later years of residency, to be together in a room and talk about what's really going on outside, and then bring that into the room in a well-managed fashion that allows us to do a little bit of both, I think was one of the more valuable things for me in the group. And also, just like it is here, hearing how everyone comes into their group feeling like, you know, and then having things work throughout the group was also another good thing about the group, to have it be a very normalizing experience, to really feel like everyone really is just experiencing pretty much what you're experiencing too, which then goes along with they're also probably experiencing a feeling as well that you might be. And I always found it helpful to understand how other people were managing that too. And that was a big growth point for me, I think, that I've tried to continue working on in CL. It's not always as easy, but I try. The second thing that I wanted to bring up too, while we're talking about our experiences, is at least for us in our group, and maybe it was just for me, but the point that it was voluntary was great, but then the cost was something that I personally always struggled with.
That's right. You mean the financial cost? because you guys
The
had to pay
financial
for it.
cost,
You had
yes.
to pay
No,
for
the
it.
emotional toll it took on me to be there with you. Yeah.
Just wanted
The
to clarify
economic
which we're
cost.
talking.
Yeah. The cost was something that was helped out by the university, which was great. And I think just the barrier itself, even how small it was, kind of really spoke to some of the stressors that we were experiencing while we were there, at least during my time. So I don't know how other programs are structured, but I think having a program that's behind that, or a department that's behind supporting a T group or a process group goes, it's, I mean, obviously not as important as the group itself, but it really speaks to kind of the setup of the program to begin with. And so I know we talked about that a lot in group 2, but those were the 2 things that I wanted to bring up.
Thanks, Andrew.
You know, at UT Southwestern, I've led 2 groups for, I don't know, 15 plus years. And because it's year by year that make up the groups, I'm wondering if, you know, there's sort of a natural developmental progression across the 4 years. When we start out with a group full of interns, we've got a lot more just natural holding by the leader, et cetera. And you've got I think, a cleaner development of the group process. I guess I want to point out, I think that's what Darlene is referring to a little bit. You know, by the time they're 4th year, they are fully in process mode. The leader is very usually held back, and the residents are fully engaged and really just brilliant at the process. But it's a year by year step to get there. We used to do it where it was an optional thing, and we had about 50% of the residents attend. You know, they made it semi-mandatory. I think they can opt out, but they have to do a journal club. Is that correct, guys? I think there's some option but it's kind of onerous and nobody really chooses it. So I don't know how optional it really is. But I find that having, you know, just a class that does work together, that goes through the 4 years together, adds something. It probably takes something away, but I think it adds something very unique and special. And they have to learn the boundary around the group time versus the work time. And I think that happens.
And that's helpful to know. I'm Vicky from Rochester, and hearing what you were saying, like, and reflecting how it was a bit different for us because we weren't all typically from the same class and going through it together. It was a bit of a hodgepodge. I could definitely see the benefits of like everyone going through the same kind of level of growth at the same time. One thing that I kind of like that was nice when I jumped in, there were a lot of people that were like upperclassmen, had a lot of really good experience in group. I did find that it did help jumpstart at least my process a lot more because I saw what they were doing, and then it was much easier to get into processing mode. And I know it's like for us, yes, there always was like the fetching about the program, but it was also easier for the other group members who were there for a while to be like, I'm getting bored. Are you getting bored? Let's change topics. And it was nice to kind of be able to model from there. So it felt like it did expedite things. So that seemed to be a positive about that.
Thanks, Vicky.
Yeah, that makes, sorry, go ahead. I've talked.
I was just thinking about the pros and cons of being all in the same year or split up. And at UC Davis, we were also, it was a mixed cohort. And in the beginning, I did have that experience of other group members modeling for me and then me getting into it faster. And then on the back end, I think the effort for me was to have like more patience with the people who didn't know how to do it yet. And so that was more the focus towards the end. That was still helpful.
You know, one of the things we do at Southwestern is have a large group of all 4 years together for 2 hours, 4 times a year. And I know, Martha, you do it as well. Is that a required meeting when you do large group, or is it just the people who are in your small T group?
We only did it last year for the first time. We had 3 90-minute large group meetings where all of the small groups met together, not extra people from outside small group. And we had about 50% attendance at best of that. So a lot of people were very intimidated and chose not to come. And given that experience, we decided not to do it again this year, since we're all working virtually and everyone has been so stressed with the pandemic. We felt like they were really needing the sort of security of the smaller groups. So we took a pass. So we'll probably try to return to it next year, because inspired by you, Dale, I think it's the issues, particularly around race last year, were much more pronounced in the large group than they have been in the small groups. So we were able to explore that more.
Yeah, it seems to me, so I'm a convener of the large group more than a participant, but which is also a participant, but it seems valuable to have the 4 years together, and there's a lot of learning across the 4 years. But I guess I'd like to hear some of the Southwestern residents address it. I'm sort of a large group fanatic, so I feel a little biased, but.
Yeah, and I think, Ben, you were the only one in large group, because everyone else is before the large groups from our program. So I'd be interested if you have things to add.
How large are the large groups we're talking about?
About 40 usually, 40 to 50.
Okay.
So ours should have been that, and it was about 16 with 6 conductors. It was not very successful.
Yeah, I mean, from what I remember, we did it you said 3 times, Martha?
Yeah.
And was the 3rd time already like during the pandemic and it was virtual? No, they were all in person.
No, they were all in person. Maybe it was only twice. I don't recall.
I mean, so I'm Ben. I just, previous year was my last year at UC Davis. And I mean, it was interesting for sure. I definitely, what the first thing that comes to mind was like the concentric circles of chairs. So there was like an inner circle and an outer circle. Nobody like really wanted to sit in the inner circle where you were, I guess, subject to more observation maybe. And there were just a lot of attempts to connect, like from one group to another group. And it felt like it was a very slow process. So I don't know what that speaks to I don't know if that speaks to like just greater intra-group cohesion. I guess I'll just say like in our residency, like in the years I was there, I felt like we had a lot of intra-class cohesion. And then, I mean, within the process group, our process group felt really supportive. I mean, it could be intense, but it wasn't very like intense in an adversarial way. So, so yeah, there was a lot of intra-class cohesion and a lot of within process group cohesion. And yeah, I don't know. I sat in the little inner circle for the large group, and that was kind of fun. More attention.
At UT Southwestern, so one time I remember we all sat in one big circle. Another time it was just kind of like in the traditional like kind of rows. And then another time we did a spiral seating, which was really interesting. And I really enjoyed the large T groups because, kind of going first year to second year, now I'm a 3rd year. I remember being a first year, not really knowing exactly how T group was supposed to work. And then going to these large T groups, it was a way of seeing the 3rd and the 4th years doing the process. And it kind of helped me see, oh, okay, this is how it's supposed to go. And then I also got to get to know the upperclassmen a lot better. And it did make me feel more a part of the group and like, oh, I'm a resident in this program. And so I really enjoyed the large T groups that we have.
That's what I was going to say was so valuable about the mix at UC Davis, because as interns, we're sitting in a group with 4th years sometimes or 3rd years, and they did kind of teach how to process. Like I think Nathan was saying earlier, somebody's saying, this is boring. Whatever you're talking about, it's boring the shit out of me. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about what's going on in the room. But I've been in group now, I'm going on my 9th year, and I'm, just a group. Like I've been doing it since 2012, and it mimics that, where there's people in the group, there's somebody in the group that's been in that same group for 20 years, and I've been there 8 years, and then we get a new person in, and it's like an intern coming in, and they're freaked out, and it takes them, you know, a year to loosen up and to get trust and all that. And so the UC Davis experience kind of set me up for at least what I fell into. Maybe I was attracted to that because of that, but it was a valuable experience when I walked into this group where there was so many people that had been in the group before. But man, 40 people or whatever, you know, our group now that I'm in is 12 people with 2 leaders. And the one at UC Davis was something like that. And this is like, it was 21 people. This is hard, right? I mean, Tina tried to say something earlier and she still hasn't said anything yet. So I know Zoom makes it hard, but you know, the more people, the harder it is. And I also learned, I'm really gonna just mute myself. I also learned from women that I talk too much. That started back in residency, so I'll go out.
I'll add to that. Personally, I feel like, you know, I'm coming from the remedial aspect of things, meaning I think I did group maybe 3 years, sorry. And I think when I did it as a senior resident, I still was not an expert. I still was struggling. And I probably just understood it and things clicked maybe the day of graduation. So for me personally, as kind of one of those remedial group members, I think it would have been more difficult to get to that clicking moment if it were a group much bigger than ours was, which I don't think was, I don't know, greater than 15 at any given time, if that much. So I really value the small kind of intimate group feeling, even with the different years mixed in.
You know, for those of you who haven't been in large group, you know, we only do the large group maybe 3 to 4 times a year, and we still have the small groups. And the idea of the large group in part is to explore what it's like to be a citizen of the residency and of the whole, you know, institutional life at the med school. And also it's the point of it in part is to try to find your voice in a large group like that, which I think is often very difficult. And there's threats to your personal identity. And, you know, in some ways we kind of have as a goal that maybe over the 4 years, everyone will find a way to speak up at least one time in a genuine way. Some people do it a lot more, but it has a whole different kind of function, you know?
With that in mind, is there anybody here who hasn't had a chance to speak up yet that would like to find a way in?
Oh, well, I was going to say something, so I unmuted myself. Julia again. This is interesting hearing about the large group. Kind of envious that I finished residency before we had this option at UC Davis to have was it quarterly? It went through 2, would have been 3.
Yeah.
Large group. Not because it would have been all safe and warm and fuzzy, but because of the value of a large group. My only personal experience having been in a large group was from my one time going to the AGPA meeting and the very large group, like 100 to 200 people for 3 consecutive days group that they would have around lunchtime. And that was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. Extremely illuminating to the world as a whole, the place that I occupy in it. I mean, issues of age and gender and race and ability. Those were really salient. A few experiences, like I remember I came in and I was new and I thought, what the hell? I'll sit in the front. I'll sit in the middle. You know, really just soak this up, jump right in. That sent waves, like just my having done that. I remember this new, I'm getting very specific here, but it was so rich. Other experiences like people will be trying to speak up, and of course people are getting spoken over. If someone's more shy or introverted, much harder. They have a softer voice. They're just old and don't have very strong lungs. I remember having the first experience in my life of serious reverence for my elders, and like, this woman has been trying to speak. It's really bothering me. She's not being heard. This tiny, frail 90-something-year-old woman sitting in front of me who I knew had something to say. And maybe she'd be dead in a few years. But I mean, shit got real. It was also extremely unraveling. I came out feeling manic. It was very clear what I then later learned theoretically, that no, it's not for therapeutic purposes, at least groups that are that huge. But my God, how illuminating. It seemed very valuable. I know I'm getting off track. This wasn't a residency, it was AGPA, but my 2 cents.
It's a large group though for Dale.
And you can come to the AGPA meeting online in February. Just FYI, here's the advertisement.
That feels like a good place. I've been trying I've been listening to everybody. Hi, I'm Sarah. I graduated from UCD a few years back. Of figuring out how I fit in. I had deep ambivalence towards my group experience in training. I did it my intern year, and then I came back my 4th year, and I came back after going to the AGPA and having several group experiences there, a large group, as well as doing an institute there and doing a process group in that format, and realizing what process group could be, and resonating with a lot of the different things that people have said, especially the UCD colleagues, and even Martha, talking about the politics of process group within the UCD program, including the very palpable tension between group and group advocates and some of the leadership within the program, where it sits within your day, trying to negotiate time for it, and having lots of in and out grouping around who's in group and not, and then how that's facilitated with I heard several people talk earlier about the intensity of being in group with people that you then have to go work with, and there are definitely lots of growing experiences, and like several other people have said, group is definitely one of those experiences that I reflect back on and that I grew a lot from. And that I can pretty unequivocally say that I'm a better doctor and a better provider because of those experiences. And I'm not sure that it was good. There's a lot of adversity that, when reflected upon, can make us stronger. And I say that partially because I've had some really great experiences in groups outside of residency, and thought, oh, these are really kind of healthy groups that push me and make me think and make me change and make me reflect. A lot of the teaching experiences within residency, the farther I get from them, I realize what the learning was, but also how maybe that wasn't the best approach at the time. And I'm not sure how you square those two circles. I teach residents where I am now, and it's really hard to get therapeutic experiences for residents while they're in residency. There's the money issue, there's the time issue, and so maybe this is the best solution for that. I think for my own self, had the program subsidized us all to go and have AGPA-like experiences at some point, that would have been a better experience for me, and probably cheaper than pulling us out for an hour and a half each week. So I have some kind of really mixed thoughts when I think back of the T group that I experienced within residency, where I have I'm an unabashed advocate for other people now to go out and experience process groups in whatever form they find them. And that wouldn't have happened had I not been in the residency group. So I have a little bit of a circular thing around it.
Sarah, can you say a little more about what you found problematic? Like, was it the working together and being with people, being at work sort of thing that makes the process group outside of the residency different?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And I think lots of other people mentioned things that I thought, yep, I experienced that same thing. The experience of being an intern and going from a code and trying to figure out, hey, do I explain to the group while I'm late, or do I fight off why I shouldn't be doing chest compressions at this moment? You know, Martha, you were talking about that. I don't know how it is now, but at least back then there was always this kind of looming threat from different forces within the program of process group is going to be cut. And so there's, you know, you mentioned earlier, facilitating in a way to protect the group's perseverance within the program, which as an alternative motive that wouldn't be there in a normal group. Having it be in the middle of the day and then go back to work afterwards, especially as I heard several people say, and I definitely experienced, having lots of emotions come up and then say, oh, your hour's up, now go back to doing face-to-face providing with patients. I don't know who all is still there, but there were definitely in certain years pressures with certain attendings who were very pro or very contrary. And it was just like this target of all these politics that were kind of above the level. And it took me a while to figure out exactly why that was so uncomfortable. And thinking back on it, thinking, oh yeah, that was just not appropriate. Being an attending now, that attendings were consistently putting us in different positions, and that you know, it sounds like you felt that as leadership too, and are responding to that as leadership. There were so many alternate forces that when I'm in process groups that don't have those, I don't have those same kind of conflictual feelings about our experience within them.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask, how much was the cost for the program that the residents had to pay to participate? How much was the cost? And then,
so the question was, how much did it cost for those of you that had to pay?
Rochester, what do you remember?
I feel like Emily, maybe you're the one, you've done it most recently. I'm going to put you on the spot here, because I remember it was over 100, but I don't remember how much. So I'm going to default to
I think it's 150, and essentially since it's billed as a class, we get the tuition reimbursement for being a resident / employee of university. So it comes after the fact. And yeah, I think it's like 150. I'm Emily. I'm a second year at Rochester, and I'll just roll with my time. So I've done 2 groups, one which was in person, and then I've done a virtual one. And ours, as we've said, are at the end of the day and are an opt-in experience. And so I think I did them back to back. I can't remember, or there may have been a summer break that there wasn't a group offered. And then I took a break because since these are shorter groups, at least the ones I had were different people pretty much entirely. So the process of restarting a new group with different types of people does take a lot of time and energy, and I wasn't at a place that I was like, okay, I don't think I want to do that again with like a totally new set of people. And then I know that Dr. Watson's getting ready to do the next one, and I'm actually not doing it because I'm going to run a group for non-psychiatry residents, and it's also going to be virtual. And I definitely would not have done it if I had not had both experiences, both in person and then virtual, because the type of data you get is very different. So I'm really glad I have the opportunity to see both modalities as a participant. And I am someone that has been interested in doing group since I was a medical student. And it's been very nice because our program doesn't otherwise really have a lot of training in this direction. And And so it's been nice for me to identify like someone who could be a mentor and helping me think through how could I opt in running groups as part of my training. And then also just getting the experience to know what it is and know it's a thing that people do and a modality that we have to treat for our patients.
Thanks, Emily.
To clarify, you said that you paid $150. Was that per group, per month, per semester?
Per semester.
Oh, per semester.
That was not something that had come up in any of my groups as a barrier. I'm not sure for the people who chose not to participate. I don't think it was predominantly because of the fee.
Although on occasion that would be the complaint, or the ostensible reason that people, oh, I can't afford it.
Although it's a good deal, you know, like my private practice patients who pay $300 a month group would like $150 a semester.
Sure.
It was a steal. It was an absolute steal.
Thank you, Aspen.
And Tina, you tried to say something a while ago. Do you want to cycle back to it?
Well, I mean, I've just had such a nice time listening to everyone's experiences. I'm kind of struggling to see, is there something novel I could add to this? And the reality is no. There's nothing I can say that you haven't already heard, except that I want to second the sentiments that, you know, I think I learned how to go beyond superficial conversation and into, you know, being my authentic self, you know, in all its glory, good, bad, ugly, everything in between. And actually, I felt like in our T group, I really think that each T group is different, and especially the way they're run at UT Southwestern, you know, just having an experience with a consistent group of people as we each go through all 4 years, it can be a transformative sort of thing. But, you know, not all groups are created alike. There are some groups where there's more people that are, you know, group minded or curious about group and are willing and able for whatever reasons in their life to take some risks and, you know, emotional risks. And then there's other groups where maybe that's not possible. But, you know, I want to say that it was really nice to be in a group where there were enough people there that took emotional risks with me to show me how it's possible to be authentic even in your professional world, and that you can create deep and meaningful connections with people that you disagree with many times. I would often sort of come into, you know, some sort of issue and be like, like, you know, this person frustrates the heck out of me. Like, how can anyone like them? And then walk out having some empathy and be like, oh, now I totally understand why they're feeling this way or that way. And I remember taking that experience with me, not only in, you know, individual therapy, but also in other group settings where, you know, with non-mental health folks, I mean, into family dynamics and whatnot. And I think it really influenced my decision to really focus on mental health as a communications sort of issue, rather than just sort of looking at it very, you know, biochemically, organically. It really sort of sparked that creative element of it for me. So, you know, now as I get to be a T group facilitator, you know, it's really nice because I'm kind of getting to see some of these things, but from the other side, you know, of the fence. So it's really interesting because it's bringing up things for me too that you know, either like internally I react well to, like, wow, yeah, this is exactly what I was feeling, or I feel like, oh, I don't know how to, you know, like how's a facilitator supposed to address this? I know how I would address this as a resident. So yeah, it's a rewarding, it's been a rewarding experience. It's also I think helped me to be more honest and hold myself more accountable for whatever comes up.
Tina, your comments got me curious about what other kind of personal or professional learnings kind of struck you, or that you feel as a result of your experience in this kind of group. What kinds of things you either came away with or discovered or learned or noticed changing in yourself because of your experience in group? I'm kind of curious about that.
I remembered, well, I guess I made peace with the fact that I can be a lightning rod sometimes. And it's weird because I feel like I really hate confrontation, but being a loudmouth, I know it doesn't sound like it here, but I actually am a loudmouth. You know, you tend to just have that effect sometimes. But sort of, it helped me to practice engaging in curiosity and instead of feeling overwhelmed and getting defensive.
Cool.
So that's been helpful. Also, that concept of like being bored. I remember that a lot of times, you know, my facilitators would say, well, bored isn't really an emotion. Bored means you're disconnected. So dig deeper and tell me, what do you mean by bored? And I remember, like, you know, that stuck with me. So I use that not only for my own personal experiences, but also, you know, with my clients, with my kids.
That's helpful. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, it really pointed out for me, group was about relationships all over the place. And in my professional life, like I was saying earlier, I worked for the state of California and a state hospital system for over 13 years now. And we just get all different kinds of people working there. And then it just helps to be able to relate to people where they're coming from, but also being able to have the confidence in myself that what I'm doing is okay, you know, like whatever's going on, it's usually not irreparable. Whatever happens to me in a relationship with somebody, I feel like I can approach that person and try to work it out, because things come up. People have a lot of insecurities. We're super competitive people. You're always worried about who's smarter than you, or what did that comment mean, or what does it mean that that guy just didn't pay any attention to the recommendations I made. I do a lot of consultations, and it's like I start feeling insecure, like my recommendations, it must be because I'm not as smart as other people. And it helps to reset. And it was something Tina was saying about just being like learning to relate to myself was a big thing. Just being able to like say, you know, you were actually a real dick and you need to try to fix that, or no, it's okay what you did, you know, just being able to sit with that. And my face is all red or whatever, and just say, you know, yeah, I get embarrassed really easy, but it doesn't mean I have to run out of the room. Because we weren't allowed to run out of the room, right, Martha? So
put words to our intention to run away rather than actually running away.
That's it. So I've actually done that in meetings. I have said, this is intense. I feel like this shame. I feel like running out of the room, and I'm not going to. I'm just putting it out there, you know, like that. And sometimes that makes people really freak out. But it's things like that, right? Like just being able to be honest about stuff that kind of got burned into me from that group experience.
I'm seeing a lot of nods to what you're saying, Eric.
And is it all right if I piggyback off that for a hot second?
Please.
Thank you. I'm Tara. I'm from the University of Rochester. I did the process group with Dr. Watson a little while ago and stayed on at the U of R, and I work as an attending. And just in the last 6 months, I've taken on a new role in supervising the resident training individual psychotherapy clinic. So this is residents who are taking all of their thus far year plus of experiences with psychotherapy and trying to apply it in their individual work. And I think I feel like I'm going to be echoing what a lot of people are saying, and I want to give a special shout out, if you guys are all right with that, to Sarah for kindling this. One of the things that I really experienced is how unique and how intense the process group was through my training. And then the other thing that I've really noticed is that I can pinpoint when the residents who are coming to me for supervision have used a tool that they learned through process group, and I can hear Dr. Watson coming through in their interventions. And it's a really powerful engagement, and I think it's such a lovely sign of somebody's capacity to take something from a group that's not a therapeutic group and apply it in a therapeutic way to their patient interactions. And I think it speaks to what Emily said earlier, which is that our trainees don't have many sort of intense individual psychotherapy experiences, and to feel it powerfully within ourselves, I think created this sort of longer lasting impression. And throughout the last hour and 15 minutes, I feel like I've heard people say, I hear myself using these words from group. And I just wanted to echo that and really crystallize that I'm seeing that. And I feel like that was one of the real values of my experience that I'm continuing to recognize when I'm putting my Dr. Watson hat on and using one of his isms, if you will. And I'm also seeing it in the years of trainees who have followed me. And I think that's a feather in the cap of engagement in a training group. Although individually, I think I really resonated with some of the stuff you said, Sarah. There were a lot of layers of engagement during residency, and a lot of, I think, challenges associated with this high intensity, highly competitive, to steal your word, Eric, environment in which we all were trying to learn and grow and develop and in some ways prove ourselves, but also opening ourselves up to vulnerability and being known as a group that is powerful and fraught at the same time. So I want to come out quite positive with a tincture of that own anxiety, because if I don't own my anxiety, I would not be true to myself at all. So
Well said,
I will
Tara.
offer the balanced perspective.
Excellent.
Vicki, do you want to get your voice in here too?
Oh, were you referring to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I did speak a little bit earlier, but I would mainly kind of be echoing about what other people said, like a lot of the positives of the experience. Definitely kind of say things that Dr. Watson says, or like I find myself kind of repeating some of those things. But like the biggest part for me was just being a lot more in tune with my personal experience, my emotions, and how I was bringing that oftentimes into patient interactions. And if I hadn't really built on that ability, and still a lot of room to build on that ability, it really would have affected a lot of the therapeutic work I was trying to do in training and continue to be doing as a child fellow. So that it served like a lot of helpful purpose. And especially also from the child fellowship perspective, it also helped a lot with trying to work more so with the families and the parents. So just because it adds even more people to the mix from individual work. So that was extremely helpful too.
Thanks, Vicki.
I was wondering, I don't know if we have any folks here that aspire to be in residency directors, but if you could at least imagine yourself in that role, would you want to make space for these experiential groups? And if you did, would you make them voluntary, or would you require all the residents to come? Where we require everybody, it's not infrequent that we encounter people who I would say are allergic to T group. But Tina's smiling. She knows some of those folks, but they're not here tonight. But anyway, I wonder how you guys think about that. Would you make space in the program for something like this?
Definitely. I'm disappointed to hear that UC Davis has shifted. It was so supported when I was there 2002 through 2006. But where I've worked and the systems I've been, I was in Kaiser, which is a big thing. Also, along with the state, I always say Axis 2 is where the money's at. We can deal with we can deal with psychotic people. We give them meds, we can help them out and everything, but the access to with patients, with nursing staff, with other doctors, and that's what the group gives. And you're going to put people that go through therapy group, I think, in residency are going to be a better representation, give you a good representation of your residency program wherever they go to work. It's only benefit. It seems like a win-win that they should pay for, at least support, especially with protected time.
Oh, Nicole.
Well, I'll just put in a quick word for research here. Eric, you might know this, but some research on long-term group psychotherapy would say that it's really the best way to get at access to problems, and that there's good empirical validation for that, especially by a guy from Norway who's done a lot of long-term research on it. And I think group in general, there's good research saying that group is as good and in some cases better than individual psychotherapy. So it is a way to reach out to more folks. But go ahead, Nicole, sorry.
Oh,
On the highlight, there's 10 minutes left. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I would definitely support including it. I guess I would have assumed sort of just making it part of the program would have been my leaning. It sounds like there might be some questions about the pros and cons of that. It's sort of coming from a position of authority, if that might damage the experience of being in a group, but it does seem like there's plenty of things that we learn that we're required to learn that aren't useful to us. So making process group a required component seems to me to make sense. So that's my take. Julia, I cut you off too, so.
It's all right. That was beautifully put. I don't know about mandatory or not. I feel like I could go down a rambling rabbit hole there, but in terms of should the residency support it, endorse it, protect time,
pay for it,
financially support, oh my God, yeah. I mean, what should be done? Yes. Even though I'll just note as a quick aside, I know that most of what we've talked about here is about how great group is, and there hasn't been as much talk of the negative things. A few people have mentioned them. They do exist. There are downsides. There are some not so good things that happen. I don't know we have enough time at this point, but
let's take the time. Go ahead.
Well, maybe it'll be
put
more
a
than
pin
just,
in it anyway.
Yeah, it's not all roses. I mean, shit's real. That's the bottom line of why I think that it's so useful, why it was one of the most important things about my training, and why I think it would be for anyone, even the naysayers, even the people who said, I don't want to deal with this, I don't like people. Well, isn't that interesting? Like, and we work with people like that. They're not so represented in this cohort, it seems, but we all know it. People come in all flavors. And we have our interactions with each other, one-on-1, 1-on-12, 1-on-350 million, whatever. And it's one person, however they're wired in a group of whatever size, it matters. And so I think even if somebody's just going to sit there and like kind of scoff or be totally blank-faced, that right there is the way that they are in the group, and then the way that it impacts other people. That's real. That's representative. That parallels what's going on outside. So I just feel like it's so useful, even with the negative things I'm alluding to have a space that's even approaching good enough for making sense of those dynamics, because at least there's some intentional, some conscious thought. At least there's some intent by hopefully a critical mass of the group as a whole, and certainly by the leadership to think about it, to reflect on it. I'm starting to ramble.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll stop there.
I think one thing that I found, one thing also that makes me think of talking about like whether groups should be supported or not, it is at least for our residency program, it is the only experiential part of didactics. So all of the rest of our didactics is just being lectured at. And in a good circumstance, it's more interactive and more engaging. But this is actually the only formal experiential learning that we have as part of our didactics. Obviously, like all of like our clinical duty is experiential. But I think that's another reason why it's really valuable.
Thanks.
I think sometimes we sort of look at negative experiences and we think, oh, you know, we need to avoid these. But I echo what Julia says, that there is a value to having those, because it's not like, you know, those negative experiences don't exist in the real life. And it's not like they weren't there if we didn't talk about them. But in some ways, if we do talk about them, you know, we have a chance at least, you know, finding our way towards repair or towards better understanding, rather than just sticking our heads in the sand.
That's beautifully put.
I'll add that I know for our group being an opt-in, there have just been some examples of people who are, you know, very vocal that they would not do group. There have been some people with a lot of life circumstances that don't put them in a place that they want to participate in group. And I think I like that they have the option if they're not ready or they have some things that they need to sort out on their.
Oh, Emily, you're freezing.
Being an opt-in and that making it a more inclusive environment.
And just to play devil's advocate in the last 5 minutes, we talked a little bit about group being free. I think to be a little cheeky about it, I think there's a cost to group, regardless of whether it's a fiscal cost or otherwise. But thinking about, thinking about paying for group, it works out if it's, it's 15 sessions and we're paying for the semester, it's $10 a session, which to Dale's point is an absolute steal. I think there's some value to putting money where your mouth is, and I think paying a little bit of money for something that and giving it a sense of value. When the world was pre-COVID, I played the card game Bridge, and so we have this weekly game, and I show up and I pay my $7 or my $5 because I value it and I want to participate, and I feel like I wouldn't want the finances to be prohibitive for anybody, but I think that maybe this was just how I justified it at the time, but I thought that there was some value in putting a monetary expectation on the residents for participating. And I felt like I was better able to sort of honor my engagement and felt like a member of something. So there's some fringe benefits there that I think are worth at least putting voice to. And I should say that, I'm so sorry, Sarah, I'm gonna let you go. I should say that because, and I acknowledge the fact that the U of R people know that I'm going to be stepping into the role as the Associate Program Director. I'm saying this from my personal experience, not from any sort of political or administrative stance that I anticipate taking in the next 6 months. So this I just want to clarify the hat that I was wearing when I made those comments.
That's a good point, Tara. Thanks.
I think that having a T group within residency is often a common psychiatric residency experience, and it's so different from groups outside of that setting and the way groups are run and the dynamics around them. And I was just reflecting on that as we were talking, and also on this year and how much we've all been pushed to do things differently this year. I got to do an international process group through AGPA through Zoom a couple of months ago, and it was a really different than any group experience I've had before, and a really helpful experience. And I was just thinking about whether or not, kind of like I said before, if I were in a residency director's shoes, based on my own experience, I would be keen to support this kind of experiences, but not directed by and mandated by my own program. And I'm wondering if there's some way to actually do an exchange between programs and residents who are all in residency together, but physically in different places, and facilitate that in a similar way, but not have the politics and the dynamics of an individual program be such a big player in it.
That's thinking outside the box, Sarah. Thank you.
Well, and in some ways, that's what we've done this evening, or, it's been very profitable to hear from the residents from other programs, sitting in Dallas. So I appreciate you all coming.
Very much so. One thing I'm going to take away is I've heard several of you from Dallas talking about leading the groups. And we have occasionally tried to recruit a former graduate to be a co-leader and not had that happen, but it makes me think about that again. And if we had more time, I was going to ask about that. And also about whether all of you have gone on to be interested in more group training and in including group leadership as part of your practices. But I know we don't have time to talk about that.
Anybody have something that is burning that they didn't get a chance to say that they want to be sure to get in before the curtain comes down?
I hate Zoom. I like to be in the room with all you guys. I want to see your body language. There's so many things in my group that I pay for that I miss being in the room and that I get away with by not being in the room with people. I know my arms, people can't see when I'm tense and all that stuff that I really want to get back in the room with people. So Zoom is not the way to go for me.
Anyone else?
Well, as I see our time here, we're at 5:30 or whatever 30 it is, and with whatever time zone that you're in right now. And I just really wanted to thank you all again for being here, just being an observer of this. It was a really rich experience, and I felt really grateful to be in on it. And I'm sure that the members of the AGPA who get to view this and are interested in residency training programs are going to find it very valuable as well. So just one more big thank you to everyone for being here. And I think we can kind of sign off and start saying goodbye as we're all ready.
Can I add one other point? It occurs to me that if as we sign off, you think, oh, there's this thing that I felt or thought, but I didn't say or wasn't commented on, I want to actually invite my people to sort of shoot me an email, or maybe those of you that are with your respective mentors or leaders to shoot them, because there may be sort of just some other things that you thought, oh, this would have been good to comment on, or this hadn't been said, or whatever. I want to invite that.
Good idea. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks.